Welcome back, Truth Seeker. Fitting, I'm starting this post at 9:11 in the morning time. Pretty sure I know what day George Herbert Walker Bush is going to die, and I'm going to tell you why I expect that to happen September 4th, 2018. With regards to 9/11 being a fitting time to start this post, don't forget that it was September 11th, 11 years before September 11th, 2001, that George Herbert Walker Bush gave his speech about the New World Order and a world freer of terrorism. And then 11 years later, on the 11th day of September, Flight AA-11 flew into the giant buildings that look like 11s in New York, the 11th state, while his son, George W. Bush, was the president. And part of the reason it just clued me in that George Herbert Walker Bush is about to die is because of how similar his story is to John McCain. Both men touted as war heroes. Both men had planes crash in the war. George Herbert Walker Bush, of course, was a president. John McCain ran for president. Clear parallels. John McCain died by the numbers August 25th. September 4th, the day George H.W. Bush is likely to die, will be a span of 11 days later, the master number. And here's why I expect him to die September 4th. You have to understand that every single president has died by the numbers, and there's not a more fitting date for George Herbert Walker Bush to die on in the entire calendar year than September 4th at his current age. So George Herbert Walker Bush is 94 years old. And when you write out 94, it sums to 147. The reason that matters is because U.S. President sums to 147. President of the United States sums to 147. There are 147 windows on the White House. And in case you're new here, when I'm saying that words sum to numbers, this is called Gematria in Hebrew. This is called isopsephy in Greek. This is a practice that's important to Freemasonry. Washington, D.C. is named after a Freemason, George Washington, who was murdered by this code of letters and numbers and dates, which is what we'll close out with. But we're establishing right now why it's likely for George H.W. Bush to die on September 4th, 9/4, at the age of 94. The word Freemason also has gematria of 147. So does the word conspiracy. Notice, September 4th. I need to make this bigger. September 4th is the day leaving 118 days left in the year, and that's a huge number with George Herbert Walker Bush, as well as Yale's Skull and Bones, which he was a member of. Him and his son, both Yale Skull and Bonesmen, both presidents. Remember in 2004, when his son ran for re-election, he ran against John Kerry, who was also a member of Skull and Bones. And we're talking about a secret society that only allows 15 members per year, a very small group of people. Yet in 2004, the two finalists for the presidency, both from that society, that secret society. So with regards to September 4th, leaving 118 days left in the year, I've talked about this before with George Herbert Walker Bush. His name in Gematria sums to 118. He was the 41st president. When you write out 41, it sums to 118. He was a member of Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones sums to 41. The word Templar also sums to 41. The Knights Templar, Masonic. The Knights Templar buried their dead at a period in time in ossuaries. An ossuary is a box where you put the bones of the human skeleton in a certain order, and you finish it at the top by putting the thigh bones and then the skull on top of that. So you get the Yale Skull and Bones logo. And notice ossuary sums to 118. Again, 41 when written out sums to 118, like Skull and Bones is 41, like Templars 41, like how Bush, the 41st president, has a name summing to 118. So how fitting for him to die on the day leaving 118 days left in the year. And the one other thing I should mention is the word death in Jewish Gematria sums to 118. So it'd also be a fitting day to die for that reason. September 4th, 2018, it'll be a date with 51 numerology. 94 would be his age of passing. 94 also has Gematria 51 in the base ciphers. 9 plus 4 plus 18 is also a date with 31 numerology. 31's the 11th prime, 11's the master number. 11 years to the day in 9/11, he gave a speech about the New World Order. It would come a span of 11 days from the death of John McCain, who, when he was questioning Mad Dog Mattis for his position at the head of the Pentagon, he asked Mad Dog Mattis in these words, "Are you aware of the state of affairs for the United States of America in terms of the New World Order?" That was his question for him to see if he was ready to lead the Pentagon. I mean, they just put this stuff out in front of everybody's face. We're supposed to be a sovereign nation. He's asking the leader of the military if he's, aware of what's going on with the U.S. in terms of the New World Order right now. People got to wake up. Sadly, Google took down my channel where that video was captured, and they showed it right on CNN. It wasn't like it was some obscure place. They broadcast it right on TV in the middle of the day when they knew everybody was busy slaving away, earning their debt dollars, earning their tax revenue for the people who've never worked a day in their life. It's the nation we live in. Anyway, skull and bones, they identify by the number 322. Just so I don't forget, I'll educate you where that number 322 comes from. A skull and bones member will say, well, that's just our address on our house building, at Yale. We're address 322. But that's not what it is. If you write out Abrahamic religions, it has Gematria 322. That's Judaism, Christianity, Islam. 9/11 was about the Abrahamic religions. You had a false flag blamed on the Muslims. You had a Christian president rallying this rhetoric, and the entire right-wing media, I shouldn't just say right-wing media, even liberal talk radio like Air America at the time was doing the same thing. But everyone was creating these Christian versus Islam narratives. And then at the same time, the day after September 11th, you had the leader of Israel, Ehud Barak, come on U.S. media and say, the United States needs to declare a war on terrorism. His exact words, and isn't that exactly what we called it? A war on terrorism. Just like Ehud Barak instructed the U.S. to do September 12th, the day after 9/11. Now, Abrahamic religions is 322. Ancient mystery religions is 322 as well. And don't overlook the 119 in light of September 11th. But the ancient mystery religions are what the Abrahamic religions are based in. Older world spiritual beliefs, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, Kundalini, all of these things and more. These old world beliefs are what are created in the riddles of the Bible. If you study the old world spiritualities, you start to realize why things are what they are in the Bible, why these numbers are used, why there's 7 hermetically sealed objects in Revelation, etc. The Bible took what came before it. So if you're part of these newer world religions, you're also a part of these older world religions. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you should know your history. But this is where 322 comes from. This practice of letters and numbers is part of Kabbalah. Kabbalah has the core belief that God created the world by merging the letter with the number. That's why there's a 26-letter alphabet. Letter equals 26, God equals 26, the 4-letter name of God equals 26 in Hebrew and in English. So look at this. From George H.W.'s birthday, June 12th, to September 4th is 84 days later, which is a special number in itself. But it's also 2 months and 23 days. What happens when you read that backwards? 322. 322. Not that 223 is not relevant. Skull and crossbones. That's what you put at the top of the ossuary. I know the secret society calls themselves Skull and Bones, but skull and crossbones, 223. Masonic, 223 in the Jewish Gematria cipher. Just like how death is 118 in that cipher. Masonic's also 43, so is Yale. I'll remind you that George Herbert Walker Bush was the 43rd vice president. His son was the 43rd president. both men, Yale Skull and Bones members. And don't forget that when his son became president, it came down to Florida, which all media was saying that entire election was going to come down to Florida a month before the election even happened, which is why I've never voted in my life. I was 17 years old then, and just watching how all that played out at the time, you know, them telling you a month before the election happened it was all going to come down to Florida, where his brother was the governor. And then it did come down to Florida, and first Al Gore won the election, and then they said, oh, wait, never mind, there's more votes for Bush. Bush won the election, and then his brother being the governor. What I didn't know back then was Gematria, but just look, Florida 43, you know, the 43rd president from Yale, his brother, the 43rd governor of Florida. Don't you just see how perfect all of this is? Don't you see what a mocking it all is? I knew then as a 17-year-old that it was King George, not President George. And I was just so embarrassed for my fellow man at that time. I thought, oh my God, so many people like this guy? This guy can't even formulate a sentence. Country am I living in? The next thing I knew, these two buildings came down in a perfect demolition, turning to dust in the air, and they blamed it on a man in a cave, and everyone believed that too. And 11 years to the day, the father of the sitting president had given a speech about the New World Order, a world freer of terrorism, the law of the jungle. What is it, just all a coincidence? Sadly, that's what everyone told me. But anyway, Barbara Bush, the wife of George H.W., she just died earlier this year by the numbers. Barbara also 43. 43 is the 14th prime number. Bush also has that Gematria 14, so fitting for the Bushes to have all these connections to 43. 43, the 14th prime. We see this pairing all the time. Barbara Bush died April 17th, 2018. If George Herbert Walker Bush does die September 4th, that'll be 140 days later. That's fitting because Washington has Gematria of 140. You know, this royal family, this presidential family, this family that has a lot to do with the history of Washington, D.C., the most powerful family in Washington. 140 days later makes a lot of sense. 140 is also a lot like 14, like Bush. Notice 140 days is also 20 weeks. Simple math, 20 times 7. Death, 20. Their deaths separated by 20 weeks, very likely. It's just like how Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan's deaths are a perfect sync in history by the numbers. As for Bush's death potentially coming 84 days after his birthday, another big special number. Masonry, 84. The House of the Temple, the Masonic headquarters in D.C., it has one presidential family's pictures on the wall. And can you guess which family that is? It's the Bush family. Masonry 84, Zionism 84, the Bushes absolutely Zionists. Jesuit 84, I'm not sure if they're Jesuits, but it's very likely the Jesuits are the Masonic order within the Catholic Church. Washington, D.C. used to be the Catholic colony once upon a time. That's why it's between Virginia and Maryland. Virgin Mary Catholic Church. United States of America also has the Gematria of 84. You know, there's the George Orwell book, 1984. He was a member of the Fabian Society, established in 1884. It's not an accident that he put that year number in his title. The founder of the Jesuits, by the way, died 84 days from his birthday. A lot of people in connection to the Jesuits have died in connection to 84. Jesuits killers throughout history. Lincoln dead in connection to the number 84. They say Lincoln was assassinated by a Jesuit. If you don't know that history, look it up. Also, it was 1944 that George H.W. Bush supposedly had his plane crash in World War II. You know, this story that he narrowly escaped being eaten by the Japanese, but like all of his comrades, supposedly George H.W. Bush was the only one to escape that fate. All the rest of them were captured and eaten, which no doubt is all propaganda. Like they say in war, the first casualty is the truth. They always have to make the enemy just seem so horrific. You know, the enemy is the worst person ever. We're the heroes. And what people don't realize is every single country does that. That's called, you know, psychological propaganda 101. How you turn your people against the other people, us and them. You know, we say that the enemies in World War II did all these horrific things which there's absolutely no evidence of. There's not a single drop of evidence for anything accused of the Nazis, anything accused of the Japanese. There is zero evidence for any of it. Zero evidence of gas chambers, zero evidence of a Holocaust. The only evidence that's there is that Jews were put in prison camps, the same way Japanese were put in prison camps in the United States. That's it. The only evidence of death in Jews in prison camps is from starvation and scurvy, the exact same as the only evidence of death of Japanese and American camps. Those are the facts. You know, facts get lost in the propaganda of war. In the United States, they don't tell us about how the greatest loss of life in World War II came in the bombing of Dresden by the British in the United States of America. And if you don't know that story, Kurt Vonnegut, American author and someone in the war, he's the one who got it out there the most. Kurt Vonnegut was there. He says it was the greatest tragedy of the war. He said it was just the worst, hearing all the death and screaming and terror. If you don't know what happened in Dresden, it's where the refugees were, the people who didn't want to participate in the war. There was a safe refugee camp for all of World War II in Dresden. And what did the British and United States of America do at the end of the war? They experimented with napalm and dropped it on hundreds of thousands of people over several hours, a nonstop bombing campaign that lasted more than a day, experimenting with napalm and killing all of the people who didn't participate in the war. That was the United States of America and the UK's effort. Why do you think they did that? Why do you think they killed all the people that were concentrated in that area of Europe who didn't want to be a part of the war, who had been safe for all of the war? You know why they did it? Because they didn't want anybody who could expose the lies that the victors of the war were about to tell. That's why. Tell you what, the real evil won World War II. And if you look at what Hitler said the people who conspire against the innocent people of this world, they all hide in the Masonic lodges. That's what he said. That's why he shut them all down. You know, I've actually gone back and listened to Hitler's speeches, and I haven't heard so much evil. I haven't heard all this racism and stuff that he's accused of. I heard him talking about a specific enemy, a group of people who want to rule over everyone else and use them as their slaves. You know? And it's funny because in the book of those people, the Talmud, it says that that's exactly is their agenda, you know? And a lot of people don't talk about how Hitler ended up rounding up a certain group of people and putting them in concentration camps. It's because those same group of people declared a war against Hitler, the Jewish boycott. Look it up. And if you look at who controls industry in this world, when you have all the people controlling industry boycotting Germany and making it so that they can't get goods or services, well, it creates major problems in their country, you know. It wasn't Hitler who declared war against the you-know-who's first. They declared war against him. He fought back, and he's demonized for it, you know. If you don't know, it's those same you-know-who's that do all this stuff by the numbers, that control your media, that control your Federal Reserve, that control your government, the puppet show that it is. Zionism. And you don't have to be a you-know-who to be a Zionist, as Joe Biden will tell you. But anyway, coming back to George H.W. Bush and his 1944 incident in escaping the Japanese cannibals. From 44 to 2018, 74 years later. And 74 is a fateful number for presidents. 3 of the first 5 presidents died on July 4th, 7-4. Remember, killing equals 74, Gematria 74. There's that song, Gematria, the killing name. English 74, Lucifer 74, Occult 74, Masonic 74, Jewish 74, Holiday 74. How about Independence Day 74? How about George Washington, the Freemason 74? And you should also know, Bush equals 58, George W. Bush 58, Freemasonry 58, Rosicrucian 58, Freemasonry born out of the Rosicrucian order, King James the Rosicrucian and Freemason dead at age 58, Secret Society 58, and there's a whole lot more to that list. But just so you can see, again, the Bush family, they have their portrait in the Masonic Temple. No other presidential family does. And we'll close out here with George W. Bush's birthday and how it relates to the death of George Washington. George W., George Washington. Now, George W. Bush's birthday is July 6th, but I just want you to see this. I know all this stuff because I wrote a book about it and talked about it a million times. July 6th. What's funny is from his birthday to September 11th is a span of 68 days. 1968, that's the year World Trade Center construction began. That's the year 911 was made the National Emergency Dialing Code. Why can I not think right now? 911, World Trade Center. Oh yeah, that's the year he graduated from Yale Skull and Bones, 68. That's the year Space Odyssey 2001 came out. And that's the year the New York Jets won their only Super Bowl. Think about it. Jets, New York, 9/11, World Trade Centers. A world of rigged sports and news. 9/11 happens, the Patriot Act. Then the New England Patriots are the greatest football team in the world after a New York Jet sacks Drew Bledsoe, injuring him so that Tom Brady can come in. You know, God's gift to football. But anyway, July 6th, here we go. July 6th. What is it about July 6th? It's the 187th day of the year. You see that? It's the 187th day of the year. Now, we're going to come back to the Gematria calculator, and we're going to talk about George Washington, who died at age 67. July 6th can be written 6/7. George Washington died July 6th, George Washington died December 14th, 1799 at age 67. He dropped dead unexpectedly. Now look at this. If I write out December 14th, sums to 187, right? If I write out 12/14, sums to 187 in the base ciphers. See this? 187. If I write out George Washington, sums to 187. If I write out Washington, D.C., sums to 187. By the way, from George H.W. Bush's birthday, from George W. Bush's current birthday to September 4th is a span of 61 days. 61 is the 18th prime. Here we are in 2018. But anyway, we're talking about 187. Washington, D.C., 187. George Washington, 187. December 14th, 187. 12/14, 187. If you write out ancient accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry, 187. 187. That's what's etched on the building, the headquarters, the house of the temple for Freemasonry in D.C. 187. And where does this number get its significance? It gets its significance from the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible that are 187 chapters long. In Hebrew, Elohim sums to 187. 187. Number associated with homicide. And consider, around the time that George Washington died is around the same time the Gregorian calendar was established and around the same time the English alphabet was standardized as a 26-letter alphabet. So all of these things have been done systematically and with a perfect plan and purpose. And from the time of George Washington and even before that, up to now, all of these rituals have been conducted by a very repetitive code. Notice 227 also connects. 227 is the 49th prime number. Scottish equals 49. America equals 49. Washington equals 49. George Washington was a Scottish Rite Freemason. September 4th, the day that HW is likely to go out, that day can also be written 4/9. See how this goes? Notice Washington's also 50. So was America. So was Bush. Want to say thank you to the 2 new people who've just purchased the book in recent minutes and subscribed on Patreon. If you want to know more about this knowledge, if you want to help get this knowledge to the stage it belongs on, I need financial support. The reason I need financial support is so that I can start doing things to push this to a bigger level. It takes money to get things, to make things happen in this world. You know, I want to be able to go on a book tour, speak on tour, show all of these rituals throughout history. I want to be able to travel when these giant false flags happen and be on scene and educate people on the street. Have somebody there that I can hire to record so we can make documentaries on the street educating people. show people how to educate about this knowledge, how to teach it to people in person effectively. I have learned through speaking to people in person how to teach this knowledge undeniably. And if more people can start mimic what I'm doing, we can spread this code, we can help this reach the masses, we can finally wake people up. We live in this nation of sleepwalkers. You know, we have all this zombie programming on TV to mock us because we're the zombies, we're the walking dead. You know, we need to wake up and overthrow the tyranny. You know, they make us go to all these years of school where we learn all this stuff and we get programmed with all this stuff that is exactly contrary to the world we live in. We're told we're free, you know, there's no taxation without representation, but the truth is we're not free. We're overtaxed. You know, we're lied to. We're taught to be honest and obedient, but we're taught to be honest and obedient and to obey lies and submit to liars and treacherous people. You know, and they really do put it all in front of our face. And sometimes you just need a little bit extra to see. And, you know, I'll also say at the end of this video, making predictions is not the best way to wake people up to this knowledge because you can be incorrect. And the thing is, I've made a lot of predictions and I've been correct about a lot of things. I've also been wrong about some things. And here I've given myself an opportunity to be wrong about something, but I'm not so much concerned with that, you know. People should know that what I'm educating about is very valid. I prove my points every single day. I put out a video like this for the hope that it hits a home run, just like when I predicted the death of Prince. The greatest awakening I ever did for anybody was the date Prince died, because so many people woke up that day because they said, wow, this person just died by the exact same numbers that, you know, I said he would die by. I said Prince has two things going. He has the number 118, the number of death, which we just talked about here with Bush. Prince's full name, Gematria of 118. And the other thing is, I said his death is going to line up with vanities. And it's all about 67, and Prince ended up dying a span of 67 days from vanity. Blood Sacrifice has that Gematria of 67. Remember, Vanity died by the numbers just before the 58th Grammys, Purple Rain 58. On Prince's album, Purple Rain, and we were just talking about 58 with Freemasonry, right? But on Prince's album, Purple Rain, I explained, he has the song, I Would Die For You, and he spelled it with the number 4 and the letter U. U is the 21st letter with the alphabetic order. 4U is 421, the date he went on to die. A span of 67 days from vanity. You know? He died on the 112th day of that year, and as I talked about, there was going to be a big ritual for him at the Super Bowl in Minnesota, which happened. You know? Super Bowl 112, dead on the 112th day of the year. Plus a whole lot more. It synced up with the Super Bowl he performed in, the only Super Bowl where it ever rained at halftime as he performed Purple Rain. I mean, come on. I'm showing you how they can control weather by the numbers, murder people by the numbers, create propaganda by the numbers, rig sports by the numbers, and they just keep doing all of these things in our face. And if you know the code, you see through all of it. So anyway, last little spiel. George H.W. Bush, when he does go, you know, he shouldn't be missed by anyone. But look at what the news media is going to do. They're going to do just like John McCain. They're going to tell you what a great guy he was, what a war hero he was, how he escaped death, how he was this brave, strong man, you know, how he led the CIA. And I should make this point about the CIA. 68, again, from his son's birthday to 9/11 is a span of 68 days. Everything was done in 68, 33 years before 9/11. Here's another good one. While we got it up here. Tisha B'Av equals 9/11. 9/11. September 11th, the destruction of the two towers. Tisha B'Av is to remember the destruction of the two temples in Jerusalem. You know? 911 is the 156th prime number. The 156th prime. If you write out false flag, Gematria of 156. If you write out 33, Gematria of 156. 33 years from 68 to 2001. You see what they did? You see what they did? Masonry 33, secrecy 30. 33, order 33, false flag also 33. You see that? The reason Freemasonry is obsessed with 33 is because of the Kundalini. Kundalini's 58 like Freemasonry. Kundalini is about spiritual ascension up to 33 vertebrae of the human being. People 33, person 33. The whole language is mathematically thought out. It's how they can create all these rituals so perfectly, because it's all so very well planned out. From the names of the months to the amount of days in the months. That's why we have this awkward system. 28 days here, 30 here, 31 here. They made it all line up. They planned it all out. These people aren't messing around. Understand this code's been around for thousands of years. You have a lot of minds working at these things, figuring them out. A lot of people invested in this. And don't forget, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, both dead on the same July 4th in 1826. 1,826 days later, James Monroe dead on July 4th. We'll leave it there, Truth Seeker. Till next time.